Hey guys, thanks for being here. I'm Andrew Noriega. This is Braden Massey. Together we run Soul Records, a Orange County-based record label. Today we have Jordan here, also known by J.Fur, a San Diego-based indie dance artist. He's going to be releasing some music on our record label pretty soon. And so we thought we would start this series to kind of like introduce some artists that we are planning on working with and introduce kind of like their philosophy, some greater things going on in the dance music world, and just kind of riff off of some stuff that we're doing. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, just want to welcome
Welcome.
Jordan.
Hell
Welcome.
yeah. Awesome, man. It's good to be here, guys. I'm stoked that we're, doing the interview.
Yeah, man, we're definitely very stoked to represent, your music and also kind of, work together at breaking that, you know, mold of, what could be cool eclectic music in the indie dance scene for sure.
It's cool, yeah, and it's cool that like you guys are doing this like here because a lot of this like style of music is like happening in other parts of the world, and like people that are here making this type of music like feel the need to like have to like go to these other places versus like you guys are creating it here, so it's so perfect. And I'm stoked to be here, stoked to be working with you guys, and yeah, just stoked to get into it.
So, I guess starting off, indie dance music. Can you tell us a little bit about what indie dance music is for the people that don't know?
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing to describe. I mean, indie dance is kind of this like broad stroke term that encapsulates all of these like subgenres of a subgenre of house and techno music. There's kind of this like groovy deep house backbone, but also these like big like synth elements that are very much like associated with like techno and like harder like rave music. And it's this really nice little dichotomy. It's got this huge range, and I feel like it's kind of on the tip of people's tongues a lot, but it's not quite described completely yet. So it's cool to be a part of something that's like still not fully defined, because it's like we're still figuring things out, and there's really not so many frontiers in dance music, I feel like, these days, because everything's got all these little boxes. But it's just cool to feel like there's a little space to explore, you know?
Yeah, it definitely feels pretty fresh.
Totally,
And it's
yeah.
still like a new, unconquered niche that I'm definitely seeing a lot of like bubbling and a lot of events and new artists coming out that are starting to align themselves with this genre.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of these like bigger, DJs and acts, they're like integrating this stuff into their sets, but people are like, there's not necessarily like a definition of like what it is, but it's being integrated into like other genres like melodic techno and deep house and tech house, but it's kind of just in its own little world, you know. But it's just cool to explore.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now that we have kind of like the music and the space that you work in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of like how you got into producing dance music and kind of your journey thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been producing in Ableton for 10 years at this point. In college, I was actually just hanging out with my roommate in college that was like my roommate when this all happened. But our neighbor in the college dorms, like, cracked an Ableton download and like gave it to me. So I got this like cracked Ableton version. We just start making beats. And I was like, this is just the coolest thing ever, right? And just making beats, exploring and all that stuff, and not really knowing like what you're supposed to make, what it's supposed to sound like, just exploring, experimenting, right? And it just happened to kind of mesh, I would say, with the more experimental side of electronic music. And I think that over the years, it's just kind of been refined, kind of like my sound. And by the time that I started thinking about, okay, what does this mean for like an actual like musical style? If I'm trying to like present myself to an audience, to other people, like what is it going to sound like? It was more of like, I'm already doing this. What is the thing? Like, what am I doing? Right? Instead of like starting with the end goal, it was more of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And what is the thing that exists that I can insert myself into based on what I'm already doing?
Yeah, for
And a
sure.
lot of these like experimental sort of genres sort of kind of made more sense. And I think it's kind of refined over time. And I think that's kind of where I've landed in like this like indie dance, progressive house, deep house, space. Because there's so much just cool like stuff going on and like people trying new stuff and stuff that is not really like I guess template or so.
Yeah, and it's like you being you. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like the beauty of it, right?
What kind of music were you listening to around this time that like you started to make music? Like what was influencing a lot of this?
Oh man. So I would say it's specifically with like electronic music, the main thing that was kind of a critical thing for me is like that French house 2010 sound. So specifically like Daft Punk and Justice. So in high school, I had a couple of like music nerd friends, and we did like an album listening party for Daft Punk Random Access Memories, and that was just like a crazy experience. We literally just like
I'm sure.
we were literally
Yeah.
like, sitting on the floor listening to the Daft Punk album on vinyl, and it was like a transcendent experience.
That's
We were
right.
literally just sitting there, drinking water,
Yeah, dude.
and
Music,
it was
music is
amazing.
like that,
Yeah,
though.
Next topic we want to get into is how did you get introduced to Soul Records? How did you hear about us? What made you reach out? We were stoked to obviously listen to your latest EP. Braden sent it to me like instantly after we got that email, and we were super excited to sign it. And so, yeah, what was your kind of like introduction to us as a record label?
I literally found you guys online while doing research for labels to
Amazing.
send my
Nice,
EP
nice,
to.
nice.
Uh, and what was really important to me was that I was looking for labels to send this EP to, and I wanted to find a label that like had the, you know, just something to work with. And a lot of these labels and a lot of the stuff that some of my other releases on, they're all in like other countries, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's good to like when I saw that you guys were based in Southern California, which is like, it's, I'm from San Diego, you guys are Orange County. It's like, oh, they're like here.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
not like
Yeah,
all the
for
way
sure.
over there. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to like meet the people that some other labels that, my music fits would, be with, right? So I found you guys online and I literally just sent it through the demo portal and that's it. And then Braden
Nice.
emailed me and we're here.
Demo
Yeah,
portal.
the demo portal works
Use it.
well.
Use it.
Use the demo
All you
portal.
out there, use it.
Honestly, it has been a very great experience the last few months, working with that new portal that we have. Been introduced to so many cool
Oh,
artists that
Groover. Groover.
we've been
Yeah.
communicating with,
That's dope.
and just like the amount of new music that we get to hear, the amount of like music that I get to hear, and like seeing what other people are what people are up to all over the world. It's just kind of like another way to like keep your finger on the pulse
Totally.
Yeah.
and to continue to
No,
get
for
new
sure.
music. And so honestly, it's been kind of like instrumental recently. It's been really fun. And obviously we got to get introduced to you, and we are like, yeah, like I was saying, super stoked on this upcoming release.
It was cool, yeah, and I did see that, like, there was a couple people in San Diego that followed you guys, and when I was checking out your Instagram and stuff, so it was like, okay, like, some people are,
Yeah,
like, in the scene,
mutual
some
friends
mutual
and
stuff, and then, it turns out that we, like, know a bunch of the same people, and then it was like, "Oh!"
small
And then
world as always.
I asked those people about you guys, and they're like, "Yeah, you guys are dope," and I was like, "Done."
Huh. Thank God the feedback is positive.
Yeah. You guys have good Yelp reviews.
Ah, make
I
or breaks a
hate Yelp.
business, as they say.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of the upcoming release, can you give us kind of like a little bit of insight into the inspiration, how this upcoming release came to be, and kind of what the process has been like thus far?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, the Building Up Cadet EP. Um, Last year I really was working on sound design stuff, and I was doing all these kinds of like crazy sound design experiments, right? And then I just kind of had all this material to work with. And then songs kind of just organically formed out of all of these experiments. And, these are kind of like the two that survived because you know how artists, when you're a producer, as all, the people listening that are producers know, like you release a EP with two songs, but like you made like 20 songs and these are the best two. That like you actually were like, okay, these are the ones that I want to finish and blah, 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 blah. And you try to finish other ones, so these were kind of like the survivors of all the experiments. But what's cool is that with these songs, like, of the musical material, not talking about, like, the drums or the kick drum or whatever, like, I would say, like, 80-90% of it is all, like, original sound design. So
Cool.
it's all, like, created by me. It's not just, like, a bunch of samples or whatever. And it's cool because it's, like, everything that's, like, in there was, like, created by me, and it's, like, just kind of like the really just like a product of, like, the experimental approach to a song. And then once you have all the material, it's like, okay, how do I make this, like, make sense, right? And that's really what it was. Really just diving into the process. And, like, this past year, I've really learned to just, like, really get deeper into the process because that's the most important part. If you start thinking about the end product before you have your process down, you're going to fall short and you're going to question your motives. You're going to be doubting yourself. Your expectation versus your, like, ability can cause, like, I guess, losing your confidence and whatnot.
And that's kind of like a big part of the record, right? Like the inspiration and like the creative behind it as well.
Totally. Yeah. Because I mean, the whole thing, I mean, especially with, like, the whole idea of, like, building up, right? It's like, as artists and as creatives, we're always building up to things, right? We're always, like, moving towards the next step. And if you're thinking about, like, where you think you want to go, because it's not always where you actually are supposed to go, right? Your process is going to take you where you actually have to go, and you have to build towards that. You have to take those steps, but it's a journey of you solely. It's all about you. It's all about your own creative journey. It's not about anything else. It's not about any sort of external expectations. And I feel like that is kind of the journey that, every creative person has to go on. You have to, because so many people that I work with, like, they think they want to do this one thing and then they make a song and it's, like, different and they, like, freak out. But I'm like, dude, that's what you are supposed to be making. You have to go down that path, right? You have to build on that. So I feel like when, going through this process of, like, making, the EP and all the other songs that, you know, were experimented on and whatnot, it was all just about, like, you know, experimenting with sound design and experimenting with the process and just, like, seeing what happens and then making sense of, like, what you are creating, but, like, not attaching anything while you're in that, like, creative flow process.
Yeah, for sure. How did you know when you were done? What's like a signifying thing to just be like, all right, now it's time to put the bow on it.
This happened after the songs that I made for this EP, but I actually took that into kind of like I tried to create a system out of it where it's like, how do you describe, like, when tracks are done? Like, what is the process of, like, the beginning idea to the middle part of the production to the production is done to now you're in the refining phase? And I figured out a system of, like, these touch points where it's like, you've got the starting idea, you have a represented idea, you have a complete idea, and now you have a refined idea.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
all of my new tracks go through this system now. And I actually have a
Yeah.
whiteboard and I have little, like, check
It's a good way to
boxes
do it. It's
where
a
it's
great
like,
way to do it.
okay, when is the idea, like, done? This is
Yeah.
when I can start sending to people, and people then when they're talking about, like, mixing things or the build up or this section
Mm,
or the A section, B section, they can give that feedback, but the idea is there. So you're just moving stuff around to just make it make sense to other people. A lot of the other, like, producers, like beginner intermediate producers that I work with, and I do a lot of consulting and, like, advice and, mentoring for other producers. When they send me a track and I can hear the idea isn't fully fleshed out, I actually don't give feedback. I tell them, hey, I feel like you need to, like, flesh your idea out more. Because if I give you feedback before the track is, like, the idea is complete, then I'm, like, encroaching on your world, right? And that's,
yeah.
like, almost kind of like, I don't know, it feels like an infringement because I feel that, our creations are like our little creative babies, right? Everyone's really proud of you. You're spending all this time to, like, make this thing, right? And if it's not done and then people start, like, saying things about it, it's just, like, not the move,
Well, I
right?
think, like, that's also, though, like, what's powerful about having somebody that can, like, get an idea of what you're thinking. You know what I mean? And I think that's, like, the whole concept of, like, quality feedback, right? Is like, naturally, though, when you, like, give feedback, it's like usually should come from like kind of like a macro perspective, right? Like,
It's always,
like what are you thinking? Like what emotional goals are you going for here? Like,
correct. Yeah.
this is kind of what I was feeling during this section. Is that like what you want? Is that intended? Like for me, I personally like it to be a little bit dancier. These are what I would use to do that, right?
Mhm.
But it's like I think you always leave that floor open to be like, this is just kind of like giving you something that might potentially inspire you or help you get through,
Yeah.
like, or flesh out like a really creative idea that like, you know, ultimately becomes something like, fully fleshed out, like you said, like a complete, song or idea.
Yeah. And definitely for like when you're giving feedback, I feel like what's really important is that how you frame your comments is really important because like
For sure.
artists,
100%.
man, dude,
Yeah.
we're all sensitive beings, man. We all got all these like deep feelings that we're just pouring into our creations, right? And it's important to like frame your feedback as considerations rather than
Exactly.
absolutes,
Yeah,
Of
okay?
exactly.
course.
Yeah. And from like your own perspective, right? Because it's like, as
It's
long as
like
you're
it's like
also saying like this is like what I think,
at
it's
the end of the
kind of
day,
just
this is
giving
just
it.
me,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And it's like it's all subjective, I still like what you're doing, but this is just like me trying to help give you something, right? Like give you something,
Mhm.
whether you like take it and run with it is obviously completely up to you,
Totally.
but even just giving anything, I think, at moments obviously provides value, to some.
All right, awesome. So, as part of the upcoming release that you have on a record label, you're also releasing a remix pack along with a couple other artists and a VIP remix by yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process, how it came to be, and yeah,
Yeah, totally. I'm stoked that you guys were down for the remix pack. I'm such a huge fan of remixes. I feel like it's always so cool. Like we talked a little bit about like the whole creative process of like creating a track and like getting your idea out there. And then there's something really special, especially when you put it in the hands of the right person to like hand off your project and have them like redux your idea into like a new thing, right? It's like you had something you created something that was complete enough that someone could understand it and then like riff on it with their own like idea, right? So I hit up my friend Ollie, who has released on your guys' label before, and my
yep,
other friend Peter Robot, who's one of my friends. He's a producer out of LA. And yeah, I had them each take a crack at well, Ollie did building up, and then Peter did cadet. So I've got these two new versions of my tracks, and it's just like you've got just these new versions of the track, and I just love working with other people, especially when it's like, oh yeah, here's a complete idea, and all you have to do is just rearrange it and make it your own version and your own like you can retell the story that I just told with my track, but you can just kind of tell it in your own way, and then there's this new representation of the same idea, you know, and I feel like that's, I mean, I've always found that to be a really cool thing. And I also kind of took the own liberty in remixing my own track and doing a VIP. And in my remix, there's like three different versions. It's just kind of all over the place, just having fun with it. Just like how can I like reimagine this idea? Because usually like when you make a track, you send it off, like there's this like gap between when the track is initially made and when you're actually like releasing it and like doing stuff with it.
Totally.
So like by the time that we have like come back around to this process, it's been, half a year since I finished the track.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I'm like, oh, I've already learned these new techniques, all these things. Ooh, what can I do with this track? Right. And like finding new ways to like just mess around with it
For sure.
and like represent it in new ideas. You know, when you're like playing more too, like you're doing more club sets, you're like, oh, how can I make this more clubby or
Mm-hmm.
more trippy
For
or more
sure.
whatever,
Fit the
right?
vibe.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's just all these fun little ways to like not reimagine the track to just make it just kind of exist in these new spaces, but like still have the same kind of like backbone of the track.
Yeah.
And it's fun. And one of my friends and one of my mentors, Jesse, he goes by the DJ name Seize. One of his like when he was teaching me DJing, one of his like tricks was you play the track and then you play the remixes of the track and you like stack the remixes of the track. So you can like in a DJ set have this like 15-minute like opus of like your one track reimagined and recontextualized in all these
For
different
sure.
ways. and you're still hearing like
Enter
their
Eric Prydz.
dude, yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
honestly, playing the remix right after the original was very, very fun.
it's
It
so
just adds a total different spin on it. You can extend it and create this like whole little world within that. It's fun.
yeah. So I mean, I think it's just cool to do that and like working with other people and you know, when you can open those collaborative doors, like you can extend the invite to have a remix track and maybe that turns into a collaboration. You know, I'm working on some stuff with Ollie now. You know, me and Peter
Love
have
to see it.
been
Love to
sharing
see
each
it.
other tracks for many months now. And yeah,
Cool. Well, to transition, we want to talk about kind of like the greater dance scene as a whole right now. What are kind of some of your favorite parties in San Diego? What's going on in San Diego?
yeah, I mean, I feel like the dance industry, I can't really speak to it like on a larger scale because I feel like I would describe myself as someone that is not really like at that large scale yet. But I can speak to the San Diego scene, and honestly, I feel like there's a lot of really good stuff going for like the grassroots scenes. There's lots of like collectives and really kind of like people that are starting like new collectives and new like parties that are really taking off in San Diego. You know, there's all these collectives like I mean Music is for Lovers, which has been around for a long time. There's a lot of Burning Man camps that do parties in San Diego. Ego Trip, for example, goes to the Spin nightclub and just decks the place out. It's always just decorated to the absolute tease, and they always have like the most like incredibly like visually stunning experiences with their parties. Um, the Afternoon Umbrella Friends is like totally pushing the boundaries of like what's possible with the San Diego scene, which to the greater, I guess, Southern California dance scene, I feel like a lot of times is seen as kind of like a satellite city to LA, but there's these cool movements going on in San Diego and the Umbrella Friends, they're throwing these like humongous warehouse parties. I don't even know how they find these venues, but it's crazy. And they're just like collaborate and it's like everything's collaborations and everything like all the collectives are like working together. It's kind of gone through this period where when I first started to like engage with like the dance music scene, there was a little bit more, I guess, competitiveness, but there's a lot more collaboration now. I think that having to go through the whole pandemic wave, which I really don't want to get into, I feel like a lot of times like people kind of harp on the whole pandemic era. I feel like in dance music, it's already been said like how that affected everything. Um, but I feel like as a result of it, at least in my community, there's a lot more reliance on collaboration rather than competition because you know everyone has to support each
For
other
sure.
because
Yeah.
there's not as much space to like fight because you know you don't want to everyone's going to sink versus if you collaborate, you know, a tide will raise all ships.
Mhm.
You know, a strong tide will raise all ships. I recently launched a brand called Digital Souls, which is going to be like my event series in San Diego. That's going to be ideally collaborating with like, you know, some of these people in the future. But the idea is to like really push this indie dance sound, electronica, dark disco, things that we were talking about
Mhm.
earlier.
Totally.
There's just an equal space for that. And I just feel like the collaboration and just the togetherness of the scene that's going on right now, it's almost kind of gone back to the grassroots because there's kind of this gap between the local promoters and like the humongous corporations because on the other side on like the larger scale like Insomniac and LED and these larger companies have kind of like sucked up a lot of like the big talent and you're either kind of like on the circuit of these like international touring agencies or you're not,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of these artists that are kind of these like mid-tier artists are struggling right now because you're either in that circuit or you're not, right? um and what that kind of does is it leaves a lot of room for like the local promoters and a lot of the local scenes to really like pop up and do some really cool stuff because it's just you have your own scene, you're like part of the scene, you're part of the city, you like know what the people want, you know how to like deck out the party. It doesn't have as much of this like corporate feel that unfortunately a lot of I would say like a lot of these like bigger festivals they're like slowly drifting more and more and more into like a little bit more of like a corporate, you know,
For sure.
parking
Money drives it
space
all. You know.
feel. Yeah, and that's like unfortunately necessary for a lot of these like larger companies that have a lot of investment and like I mean it's a
Of course.
business,
Yeah,
dude. It's a
exactly.
music business,
Business.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
You can't really like hate the player, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
of
these
course.
sense. But on the positive note, it's more so that there's so much opportunity for like the local communities to like make some stuff happen. And that's why I'm
Totally.
really excited to be like working with you guys with what you're doing in Orange County and with what I'm doing in San Diego. There's so much opportunity for some good stuff to happen.
Yeah, I definitely think
Agree.
there is like such an awesome place to be in those like those like lower to mid-tier local events. There's so much good talent that is just undiscovered from like the greater community, from people just like wanting to go out and see those like songs that they see on social media everywhere from these like big name artists, but
Yeah.
like kind of like like what it comes down to for so much of dance music, what like drives it is like those local artists playing at these like very local events ran by promoters like yourself with your new event, like Soul Records, like all these like Daisy Chain, like
Yeah.
um all these smaller promoters within the local scene. Like they're the ones driving these like new sounds, this fresh music, and I think that's such a big part of it. Obviously, those are the artists that are eventually getting up to those higher tiers, but I think it's very important for people that listen to music to like go out and support these smaller events because this is what's driving the music.
Well, yeah, and everybody starts as a seed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of
So like
course.
everybody kind of goes through that stage.
Yeah, but I
At
think
some point, regardless of how long that stage lasts for them, obviously is kind of up to how well they are grasped by
Yeah.
the world, right? But I think that's the beauty of it. The underground gives you that insight on like up and coming talent that eventually maybe they all do great things, right? But the
yeah, for
idea
sure.
is that, when you believe in good music, there's others that are around you that are creating good music. And, I think supporting that and coming together and also just like having fun with it, is so awesome and important.
Yeah. I feel like for a lot of like new artists that are like trying to like make a name for themselves, there's kind of this feeling that you have to like go viral and stuff. But like you're in a city with a community, ideally, right? There's some people that are in places where that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
but for people that are like in cities, like there is a community that's already out there. So it's like go engage that community
Hmm.
because like those
Yeah.
are where you're going to be going on the weekends anyways, or enjoying the music, enjoying that scene, right?
Meeting friends.
Don't think yeah, I mean, like, you can kind of go viral, but then, like, your whole basis of your career will be based on those, like, viral moments, right? Versus, there's people in the real world that are your neighbors down the street, at your local bar, at your local club that are, I would say even more valuable because it's more connected to your, like, real life, and it's more connected to, like, your, day to day. It's not as, like, virtual, and I think that, um, a lot of these people that are, really getting after it with their music careers, it's good that you're trying to project yourself to, like, the wider audiences and the content game and everything like that, but, like, I don't think that you should sleep on your local community, like, and I really feel like that's what's cool about what we got going on here is that, like, it's happening, like, here in the real world, like, we're all here together physically. Obviously, people will be watching this on YouTube or listening to it or wherever, but like there are people that you can like literally hand your music to. Like I will show up to events with USBs and like give them to people. I showed up to the Music is for Lovers one of the events and I met the guy that runs the whole place, Jimbo, and I gave him a USB that's like here's all my music, right? And I don't even know if you listened to it. But then the next year I got contacted just because I had met all the people to, submit a song for their compilation, and then bam, I'm on the compilation. And it's like a record label that's like here in San Diego that's doing stuff where it's like, oh, the parties are like here. It's not just like this virtual thing, right? It's very much physical in the real world.
That's like always kind of like the one thing that I always talk about when I talk to like new upcoming artists is literally just get into the mix as much as possible. just like show face as much as possible, just because things move so fast. Like if you want to get booked, do you want to play anywhere, like you just need to like be present. It's like the most important thing you could possibly do, because not only are you supporting those other people that are playing, but you're also just like interacting with the local crowd as much as possible. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do to support the community, to support the shows, to support the promoters, but to support yourself as well.
Totally. And I feel like one thing that people like maybe forget from time to time is that dance music as a whole, as a genre, as a culture, was like born out of community, out of necessity for community. And a lot of the groups that came out of Detroit, Chicago, that migrated to Europe and grew in Europe, and it's now this like huge scene. But like the nexus of all that is like communities. So it's like that's never going to change. It's always going to be grassroots. Every movement that's humongous started with a group of 3 people sitting in a room deciding that they want to make something that sounds like this.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jordan. Well, thank you for joining us during this conversation. That was awesome. Loved your insights on San Diego, your artist project, what you're doing in San Diego with your own collective, and the greater music scene insight that you were able to provide. That you were able to provide us. So everybody, go follow J.Fur on Instagram. He has a release coming up on June 7th on Soul Records. I'm Andrew Noriega. This is Braden Massey. Together we run Soul Records, a house and techno label based out of Orange County. J.Fur, what do you have to say to the people?
Yeah, I hope you guys like the release.
Nice. Thank you again, man. We really appreciate you spending time with us and answering some of our questions. So
Yeah, man.
until next time.
Dude, yeah, awesome. Thank you
And
guys
be on
for
the
having me.
lookout. Yeah, be on the lookout for his upcoming releases and shows.
Cool stuff. Yeah.